The first crossover between Marvel and DC characters happened in 1976, when the Man of Steel met the Wallcrawler. A few more crossovers occurred in the 1980s, before the intercompany cooperation really took off with Marvel vs. DC in the 90s. That event did not begin on Earth 0, Earth 1, Earth 2, or even on Earth 616, but it started instead in the cold vacuum of space, when the Sentinel of the Spaceways met the Emerald Knight. Previous crossovers between Marvel and DC had been successful but short-lived, consisting solely of one-shots, whether they be treasury-sized, such as the encounters between Superman and Spider-Man, or the Incredible Hulk and Batman, or normal-sized, such as the X-Men and the New Teen Titans. But in the mid-90s, both publishers agreed on a project, the scale of which had never been seen before or since. If the unprecedented 4-issue DC vs. Marvel series wasn't enough to satisfy your cross-company collaboration desires, then the fact that it served as a springboard to the 2-year-long Amalgam Comics project should certainly have taught you your lesson. So the Amalgam universe was born of the Marvel vs. DC event. But what gave birth to that pile of fan service? Did it need another comic to act as a prologue? No, but it got one anyway, in the form of the Green Lantern and Silver Surfer Unholy Alliances. Had this comic come out a year earlier, we would be looking at Hal Jordan sporting the ring. As it was, roughly 8 months before this came out, this happened. In the Emerald Twilight storyline, Hal Jordan turned against his fellow Lanterns in the aftermath of his home city being destroyed. He wanted to recreate it using the power of the ring, but was told that that was in violation of the rules of the Green Lantern Corps. At the end of that storyline, he drains the central power battery and concludes his transformation into the villain Parallax. With the entire Green Lantern Corps destroyed, one of the Guardians of the Universe makes it to Earth with the very last Green Lantern ring. He gives it to a guy called Kyle Rayner, and, well, you can see what happens next on this cover. Want more detail? Okay. This was written by Ron Marz, a guy who had only started working with the character on the Emerald Twilight storyline, but stayed with it off and on for the next 10 years. Ron clearly enjoyed working with cosmic superheroes, because prior to working on this series, he spent 5 years at Marvel writing The Silver Surfer. He would also go on to be one of the principal writers of the DC vs. Marvel event. The penciler is Darryl Banks. More on him later. You want more detail? Fine. Let's have a look at the thing. The issue begins with Kyle Rayner being thrown for a glass shopfront by this issue's villain, who's called Ohm, O-H-M. It's Kyle's first bit of action as the all-new Green Lantern, and it isn't going very well. Now, some of you may be thinking, that's not Kyle Rayner, that's Hal Jordan. I recognise the suit. Well, yeah, you do recognise the suit, and I suppose it is Hal Jordan's suit. Kyle was only given the power of the Green Lantern in the previous issue, and this, as I've said, is his first bit of action. So the ring has given him the generic, I suppose, Green Lantern suit that Hal Jordan wore, that John Stewart wore, although John Stewart didn't wear a mask. And Green Lantern fans will know that that was for more than just superficial reasons. He does go on to get his own distinctive outfit, Kyle, but for now he is wearing that classic suit, which I have to say is probably my favourite DC superhero suit. I think it always looked good, even when it was kicking around like in the 1960s, which is a rare thing for a superhero suit. Just as Kyle is getting his butt handed to him on a plate, we have a flashback to the previous night when he visited his ex-girlfriend to tell her his exciting news. He breaks this to her by just appearing in the Green Lantern suit, which she bizarrely describes as the dumbest stunt he's ever pulled. He then explains to her briefly that an alien appeared to him, gave him the ring, and then vanished. And she responds as though she doesn't believe a word he's saying. Then, however, she changes tack completely, because she says, haven't you made the connection with the Green Lantern? Which is a name, bizarrely, that Kyle Rayner doesn't really seem to know about. Because he says, with a what? And she says, no, it's not a thing, it's a person. And then he's like, oh yeah, the superhero, Green Lantern, yeah. I forgot about him. Bizarrely, it seems he hadn't made the connection with wearing the exact same outfit and having superpowers as the Green Lantern superhero. He also remembers that the Green Lantern could fly, so he wonders if the ring can do that for him, and of course it does. His ex, Alex is her name, then says to him, well, okay, let's say you have got something here. What do you mean, let's say you have got something? He's flying in the air. He does have something. He says he's going to be a hero, and her doubting response to him gives the writers the chance, in one panel alone, to explain to us, readers that are new to this character, his background. He does have a job, although he seems to struggle to hold down jobs, and the one he's got pays barely enough to pay the rent. And we then have a conversation which tells us about their relationship, because she is a photographer for a local newspaper, and he says, don't you want more out of life? I want more, and the ring could give us the opportunity to get more out of life. And also, he suggests they get back together and they move to New York. Once there, he says he'll do the hero thing and she can take pictures of him. I've heard that kind of setup does work, especially in New York. She thinks about it and agrees, and he's over the moon. And he says, from now on, I promise I'm going to be the most responsible guy you know. He's going to turn over a new leaf. And she says, well, you better be. And it seems they've got a nice little relationship there. And it's nice to have a happy couple. I hope they go on to spend many happy years together. Her name is Alexandra DeWitt. If you don't already know about her, Google her. Having spent the night on the couch, Alex wakes him up in the morning, telling him that there have been reports of a guy in a suit of armour causing havoc downtown. They head over to the scene of the action, primarily so that Alex can get some pictures. And when they see this guy, she says to Kyle, look, stay here, don't get involved. The guy is clearly a maniac. But Kyle says, sure, don't worry, I'm Mr. Responsible now, remember? I'll just sit here and watch. Although he finds that's something he just can't do. He confronts Ohm, thinking this is going to be easy, but he quickly discovers that just ain't the case. And now we're back at the point that the issue started at, with Kyle emerging from that broken shop window. We then get a traditional Green Lantern battle, in which the Green Lantern creates various shapes out of the green energies of his ring, and ultimately he's successful in defeating Ohm, cutting him out of his suit of armour and finishing off with a little quip. Come on out of there, Prince Albert. He's defeated the baddie, and the adoring public tell him how great he is, although they do seem to think that he is the Hal Jordan version of Green Lantern. Later on, Kyle and Alex are watching the sun set at the beach, when she points out that really the Green Lantern suit isn't his suit. He needs his own identity. He agrees, he has a think, and he conjures up the new design. It's okay. I've never really been convinced by the mask of Kyle's outfit, although overall it is a distinctive outfit. It's certainly his Green Lantern outfit, but I prefer Hal's. Nonetheless, we have our new Green Lantern, and I have to say, he's a very likeable character, Kyle Rayner. And a nice little setup as well there, with him and Alex in LA, although they quickly moved to New York. And it is easy to see why he became such a popular character.
So now we know about the Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, but what about Norrin Radd, the Silver Surfer? Of course, he has a much longer history in comics, after debuting in the Coming of Galactus storyline in issue 48 of the Fantastic Four back in 1966. After making several more appearances in that title, the character proved popular enough to headline his own, although it only lasted 18 issues. That series was written by one half of his original creative team, Stan Lee. The art, however, was not provided by the other half of that team, Jack Kirby. Instead, it was provided by, well, it had to be, didn't it? Big John Buscema. Nearly 2 decades passed before the Surfer got his second ongoing series, incidentally his longest running, and one which celebrated its 100th issue the same month that this came out. That 100th issue was written by Ron Mars, one of his last Silver Surfer issues. So, this crossover was written by someone who knew both characters well, but what about the artist? No, it wasn't Big John. Instead, it was none other than the Green Lantern's regular artist and co-creator of Kyle Rayner, Darryl Banks. Darryl's run on the Green Lantern was by far his longest, as he only produced literally 1 or 2 issues of any other title he worked on. So, a newish Green Lantern and a familiar Silver Surfer. What happened when those two met? Amidst the cold desolation of a recently destroyed planet, one of our heroes, the Silver Surfer, encounters cyborg Superman, also known as Hank. The Silver Surfer isn't familiar with him, and actually, Cyborg, as he calls himself, isn't familiar himself with his surroundings. He is responsible for the destruction of the planet amidst the debris of which these two now encounter each other, although he tries to blame the planet itself, saying that it tore itself apart because it couldn't stand the pressures of him trying to turn it into a war world, which is his shtick. And actually, there's a nice little nod to continuity there, because it's a result of him trying to turn Earth into a war world that Cyborg destroyed Coast City, the home city of Hal Jordan. That then, of course, led into the Emerald Twilight storyline, which led to Hal Jordan becoming Parallax and Kyle Rayner becoming the new Green Lantern. As you can imagine, they hit it off instantly. And at this point, I've got to say, I know this is the deluxe format, but the ink work, the colours, the printing is all pretty much the norm for the 90s. And it's so different to what we are used to seeing on this programme. We leave there mid-battle to join Kyle Rayner, who is in the process of designing a new logo for the cafe above which he lives. He's interrupted by an explosion. There's trouble brewing, and he, as the Green Lantern, needs to deal with it. He changes into his Green Lantern uniform in a picture that is a triumph of greens. And at the same time, he explains to us, the new readers, if you're a Marvel reader at this point, being introduced to the Green Lantern, he explains his Green Lantern ring to us. It's the most powerful weapon in the universe, although it does need charging up from time to time, hence that collage of greens. Once charged, he flies out to deal with the source of the explosion and discovers another former Herald of Galactus, Terrax. As you can imagine, the Green Lantern has no idea who he is, but Terrax knows Kyle because he was told about him. Then, just as they begin to know each other better, we return to the Silver Surfer and Cyborg. They are having a hell of a fight, and both of them are supremely confident in their own power levels. Silver Surfer says, "Yeah, you're powerful, but I command the power cosmic." And Cyborg's all like, "Yeah, so?" But at that point, a new player enters the fray, Hal Jordan. Things aren't going quite so well for Kyle. He is being bested by Terrax. And there's a nice little line where Terrax says that once he deals with him, there'll be no one left to oppose him taking over the Earth. And Kyle says, "This guy called Superman, maybe? Ever hear of him?" To which Terrax replies, "No." And again, a new player enters the fray. It's to save Kyle Rayner, and it is Thanos. Okay, so we've got these two encounters taking place in two separate universes. The Silver Surfer is battling Cyborg in the Marvel universe, whereas in the DC universe, we've got Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern facing off against Terrax, and of course now Thanos has appeared on the scene. So what's going on? Someone needs to explain, and the man for that job is Hal Jordan. First of all, he informs Cyborg that he's now called Parallax, and at the same time reminds us, the reader, that Parallax isn't quite the good guy that Hal Jordan was when he was the Green Lantern. He does, however, instantly attack Cyborg, saying that he has to answer for the lives that were lost in Coast City. And this action, paired with the fact that Surfer already knows that Cyborg isn't a nice person, convinces him that Hal Jordan, out of the two of these strangers, is probably the one who is in the right. Hal explains that he and Cyborg are from a different universe, and Cyborg was in that universe when he was suddenly snatched away and placed into what we know as the Marvel universe. And Hal, with his power, was able to follow him. One picture alone opens a window onto the soul of Hal Jordan, as it shows that not only does he have the power to follow Cyborg across universes, but also that single-minded determination. The Surfer says, so you're doing all this in the pursuit of justice. Justice for those millions of lives that were lost in Coast City. And Hal says, yes, he is, although recently he has done some questionable things. He's only ever tried to make things right. And he says, surely you can understand that. And of course, Silver Surfer, with his history of being the herald of the planet devourer Galactus, can not only understand it, but he can directly relate to it. Kyle Rayner, meanwhile, is watching on as Terrax claims that Thanos is the one who sent him there in the first place, saying that there was a whole new universe to be conquered. Thanos says it's the ravings of a madman, but that discussion doesn't last long anyway. Whilst Thanos turns on the charm, seriously, the Silver Surfer explains to Hal his own history. After hearing it, Hal Jordan recognises the similarities they both have, the demons they both carry with them, and he says, imagine if we pooled our power together, what we could achieve, what wrongs we could put right. Thanos is telling Kyle that he needs his help, his power, the power of the Green Lantern's ring, to defeat a menace so destructive, so omnipotent, that it could destroy both of their universes. I don't need to tell you who that threat is, do I? So Silver Surfer empathising with Hal Jordan's motives, and Kyle Rayner believing that Thanos is a good guy, after all he saved him from Terrax, both agree to their respective propositions, and both hope they're doing the right thing. What a great colouring job on Silver Surfer by Digital Chameleon. Strange name to call your child. Actually, this has happened a lot since the 1990s, when publishers started farming out their colouring to independent companies. Digital Chameleon themselves were based in Manitoba, Canada, and they worked on various animation and also advertising, as well as comic books. I say they were based in Manitoba because they ceased business in 2003, 12 years after they started up. Hal tells the Surfer that all they need to do to begin their new work is to touch hands. And in doing so, Silver Surfer gives Hal the power boost he needed, and instantly that planet that was destroyed by the cyborg is reborn. Surveying their work, the Surfer thinks how great it is, and how it seems to be without consequence. That, of course, is because he can't see Hal's face. Although he should have picked up on the fact that he said, "This time they can't stop me." Meanwhile, Thanos has revealed that he has a weapon capable of stopping Hal Jordan. All he needs is for Kyle to sit in the chair of the weapon and give it a power boost with his Green Lantern ring. So basically, both of our heroes are being used as batteries or power boosters. As Kyle gives Thanos the power he needs, both the Surfer and Hal sense that there is a problem, that someone is tampering with the structure of both universes. While they make their way to the source of the disturbance, Thanos explains to a completely drained Kyle that it was never his plan to stop Hal Jordan. He wanted the power of the Green Lantern ring so he could, as always, attempt to court Lady Death. He has been banished from Death's domain, so now he thinks with his increased power levels he will be able to destroy everything, so that all that exists will be Death. Then he'll be able to take his place by her side. As Kyle is about to become the first person to join Lady Death's domain, all of our players meet. Now, normally in a book like this, when the two heroes meet for the first time, they fight due to misunderstanding each other's motivations. Now, that isn't strictly speaking what happens here, because the misunderstanding is all on the side of the Silver Surfer. Hal Jordan says, "There is my replacement, I thought he was a hero. However, he's clearly in league with Thanos, so he must be a villain." Kyle Rayner doesn't want to fight, he wants to explain the situation, what's happened, but Silver Surfer doesn't really give him any choice. And what about our two antagonists? Do they join forces? Thanos explains that the reason he wanted all of the energy of Oa, which is what powers the Green Lanterns, is that he wants to destroy everything that exists. And there's a nice little line here as Hal Jordan says, "I finally have enough power to recreate everything. Our goals, it would seem, are at odds." I feel like we should have Kashmir playing by Led Zeppelin, but I don't want a copyright strike against me. So I guess we'll just get on with the fighting. And what fights? It's at this point, now that the Green Lantern and Silver Surfer have finally met, that something becomes apparent. Thought balloons had somewhat fallen out of fashion by this point, and instead we had text boxes showing us a character's inner monologue. Here, the Green Lantern's text boxes are coloured pale turquoise and white, and the Silver Surfer's are coloured pale blue and white. Okay, I can see why they chose those colours particularly. Turquoise, Green Lantern, and the blue and white is similar to the Silver Surfer's colouring. But they could have chosen colours that were more distinct from each other. They even confused themselves a few pages later when they colour Kyle Rayner's text boxes with the Silver Surfer's colour scheme. Finally, Kyle gets the Surfer to listen, and he shows him what Hal Jordan and Thanos are doing. What they are doing is busying themselves, respectively, creating and destroying. At one point, Hal even recreates Coast City, and it is when Thanos destroys that Hal is really tipped over the edge. He says the only thing that will be destroyed today is Thanos, but Thanos can't lose, because he says to Hal, "By all means, try to kill me. Send me to my lady's side." It's at this point that our two heroes intervene, and Hal can't understand why the Surfer is trying to stop him. But the Surfer explains that Hal's obsession has unbalanced him, and that he should have seen it sooner. Kyle realises that the only way to put a stop to all this madness is to take back the power. Take back not only the power that he had given to Thanos, but also the power cosmic that the Surfer had imbued in Hal. But that is a lot of power, too much power, and he can't control it. So the Surfer says give the power to him, because he stands a better chance of surviving the experience. As the Surfer struggles to contain the power, he reconciles himself. Reconciles himself to the fact that he may die as a result of this. But if he does, he will be saving the lives of billions upon trillions of life forms. And that will redeem the actions of the past that have weighed so heavily upon him. Of course, eventually he is successful in controlling the energies. So tell me, what are the Silver Surfer's superpowers? Yeah, I know, he wields the power cosmic, but specifically, what are his superpowers? Exactly. Look it up on Wikipedia. That's what I did. There's a nice little moment where the Surfer says that far from having a lot in common with Hal Jordan, he actually has more in common with Kyle Rayner. He says that Kyle is a saviour, a hero. And Kyle says, "Thanks, I'm trying." Now the universes begin to right themselves, as Thanos is pulled back into the Marvel universe, and Hal Jordan is pushed even further into the DC universe. And the Surfer says he too needs to go, whilst he still can. Maybe they'll meet again in the future, which seems unlikely to Kyle. Everything has returned to normal, although actually Kyle has actually had some good character development. At the beginning of this issue, he said that the Green Lantern ring was apparently the most powerful weapon in the universe. But now, after the events of this story, he believes it. And actually, the whole thing was really enjoyable. The 90s weren't a great period for comics, but everything in this was done really well. You've seen the art, and the storyline, the motivations of the characters, was all very believable. Hal was a very good three-dimensional antagonist without being a bad guy. So all in all, yes, a well-worthy team-up. With that, another one-and-done crossover comes to an end. Actually, that's not true, because this comic served as a prelude to DC vs Marvel, and not just because it came out before it. On the final page, when we see Kyle Rayner's last thoughts, there are 3 more panels. Overlaid on them
are Carl's thoughts about how glad he is that it's all over, but the actual panels themselves show an innocuous alleyway, wherein is found a beaten up but clearly special cardboard box. We are left not knowing the significance of this box, but in the Marvel vs. DC event, we learn that there is infinitely more to it than there seems. Incidentally, you remember Carl's response when the Surfer said maybe they would meet again? Well, in DC vs. Marvel, they did. And owing to the nature of that series, they fought, with the Surfer emerging victorious. Before the incredibly brief battle, they hinted at their previous adventure together, which is nice. We all like a bit of continuity, don't we? So now we really have reached the end of the Green Lantern Silver Surfer crossover. Marvel vs. DC and the Amalgam Universe? I'm not quite ready to face those just yet.